Yep.
Breath. Push. Push, push, push. Grab those legs. Keep going, keep going. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Close your breath. 9, and down. Alright,
It has officially been over 2 months since my last vlog that was tracking and talking about my pregnancy that has now resulted in Colton. He is 2 months today. It is February 19th, 2020. He was born on December 19th, 2019 at exactly 38 weeks. My last update, I mentioned how I knew it was probably going to be my last update, and I was being watched for gestational hypertension. My blood pressure readings had been high. I was having shortness of breath, even sitting up, wasn't sleeping well. I spent the last about 2 weeks of my pregnancy sleeping in the recliner in our nursery. And yeah, headaches and just feeling really crummy. So I had been scheduled to go in for my induction on Thursday, December 19th at 8 p.m. I had my 38-week appointment that had been scheduled for the day before on Wednesday, the 18th, around 10 a.m. I believe it was. And we went in for that appointment, and my blood pressure was the highest it had ever been. I can't remember what it was exactly, but did my blood pressure readings. They put us in a room, and the first thing my doctor said when she came in was that I was going to the hospital. So she did a very, very brief check just to see where I was at, and I was just about a centimeter dilated. Sent us straight over to the hospital. Of course, at that appointment, we did not have our bags packed. Well, our bags were packed, but they weren't in the car. So my husband dropped me off to get admitted. They knew I was coming. My doctor had called ahead, and then came back home to load the car up with our hospital bags and his bag and everything else. So this vlog is just going to kind of take us through my birth story, or Colton's birth story, which I shared a bit about on my other social medias with a written out story of his birth story and how that went down. But it's always a little different when you get to tell it and through your own words, verbally speaking to someone. So share that today, along with the most special video clips that I will probably ever have that we captured during his birth and when I got to hold him for the first time after he was born. So as I mentioned, I went into the hospital for an induction due to gestational hypertension on Wednesday, December 18th. I arrived there just before 1 p.m. and was admitted and got hooked up to an IV and basically got ready to get things going. They gave me a pill first to begin softening my cervix and seeing if we could continue to get me some progress dilating before going to Pitocin. So I took a pill at 1 p.m. and then you wait 4 hours. So I waited for 4 hours, and during that time, I definitely, first of all, the moment they put the contraction monitor on my belly, I was having contractions. I just wasn't feeling them. They weren't prominent enough, and they weren't doing anything for my progress. So right after I took my pill, I could feel the contractions kicking in. I would describe them as a bad period, like cramps from a bad period. And over the next couple hours, they got more and more intense. But nothing awful. It just felt like period cramps. And I mean, period cramps magnified by quite a bit. But I bounced on a ball through some of those. I did my makeup a little bit. It was funny because I had all these plans that, hey, we're going in for an induction tomorrow. I can shower, I'll shave my legs, I'll go in with my hair clean and done and maybe some makeup on. It'll be great. Well, we went to my doctor's appointment Wednesday. No shaved legs, no hair done, no makeup done, because I just felt awful. So I at least did a little bit of makeup, but everything else was out the window from what I had thought maybe I would have or look like in appearance, which is not what's important when you're birthing a baby, but it can make you feel a little bit better. So did a little bit of makeup, watched a movie. My husband got there a little while after my pill had kicked in, so hung out with him. And then at 5 p.m., my nurse came in and checked me, and I had not made any progress. So they called my doctor and decided to let me labor for another hour to see what kind of progress we could make. In the meantime, I'm still having contractions. It's about every minute and a half. At 6 p.m., my doctor came in and she checked me and she said I was at least a 2. So we're gonna go ahead. We broke my waters. Weirdest, probably one of the weirdest experiences of your life. I did not look at anything she used to do it. My husband, I think he did. And then it just basically felt like you're peeing yourself forever. And it will just continue. You know, you laugh, you squeeze, and more just kept coming out. So at that point, they broke my waters and started me on Pitocin. And my body responded very easily to Pitocin. So I never went higher than a 7, and I was only at a 7 for probably about 10 minutes. But the Pitocin, like I said, I responded very easily to it. So after my contractions, his heart rate would start to dip pretty normally, regularly. After every contraction, his heart rate went down a little. And we obviously don't want that. And so we backed me off of it. I was at about a 5 for most of my labor. 3 and a 5 were my Pitocin levels that, you know, I think did some work. So that was at 6 p.m. We're 5 hours into labor. I labored until 11 p.m. naturally, so another 5 hours. At this point though, my contractions, all I could do is breathe through them. And getting out of bed so that they could position it for the anesthesiologist to place my epidural, I was crying, shaking, in so much pain at this point. John was kind of helping hold me up while they got everything ready. And he came in and said, "Are you ready for your epidural?" And I said, yes. I could barely respond, but I was so ready for it. So at 11 p.m., got my epidural. I have scoliosis, so I knew it was gonna make placing my epidural a little more difficult. Basically, my spine comes down and then veers off to the right, about an inch over from where the rest of my spine would go down. And so the anesthesiologist worked around that. I think, you know, the shot that numbs you is the worst part, and even that wasn't awful because you're already in so much pain. That's why you're getting the epidural. But placing the catheter and the epidural were interesting, and he forewarned me that I could possibly feel like a zinger, you know, like if you hit your elbow on something. So just to let him know. So he goes to place it, and right away I feel it on the left side, and it is a weird feeling. So backed off, went to replace it, felt the zinger on the right side, backed off, went to replace it again, and then at that point, he asked if I could feel anything anymore, and I said no. So we got the epidural placed, great, taped it up, and then let me lay back and relax. I got my test dose and could already start feeling it. So I felt my epidural kicking in within the first 10 minutes. By 15 minutes, I felt really great. But then, unfortunately, sometimes there is the warning that after an epidural is placed, your blood pressure might drop, or your heart rate might drop. And at 11:15, 11:20, all of a sudden my nurse, who had been pretty chatty, all of a sudden wasn't so chatty anymore, as she was working on the computer and looking at all the monitors and everything. And John was sitting next to me, and we were just kind of hanging out, and next thing we know, I had 5 nurses. The rest of the nurses from the nurses station all came walking very fast, if not running, into my room. And I heard one of them say, "How long has he been down for?" And at this point, I had no idea what was going on, but that's not a question you want to hear a nurse ask in reference to your baby. And my nurse said that he'd been down for a minute and a half. And at this, the panic started to grow, the worry started to grow as to what was going on. Was he okay? They proceeded to lay my bed down flat and put me on oxygen. And because my epidural was already kicking in, I had to have nurses manhandle me and roll me from side to side. All throughout my labor, he did not like me laying on my right side. When I would, his heart rate would drop after contractions and stay down for longer than we like to see. So I could only lay on my left side. So they rolled me over onto my left side. I'm hooked up to oxygen. I have 3 nurses around my legs and my hips kind of helping me. My nurse is continuing to watch the heart rate monitor. At this point, we can't find a heart rate at all through the monitor that was on my belly. So they began the process of trying to attach the internal heart rate monitor. That kind of does a little screw clip into the top of his head. And my nurse tried twice to get that attached to him and could not. So at this point, I'm continuing to get very nervous and worried and anxious because I just want to know that he's okay. And no one has seen or heard his heart rate for a couple minutes now. And at this point, my nurse is telling me that we may be headed for an emergency C-section, while the other nurses are beginning to move me onto all fours. I'm not sure what this does for heart rate and blood pressure or anything like that for me or baby, but with both of our heart rates having dropped down low, they moved me onto all fours, and I was told I could possibly be going for an emergency C-section. The on-call laborist was called to be brought in case we were headed to a C-section and for him to kind of assess the situation. And so he came in, I'm on all fours, my gown is just wide open to the world. At this point, you don't care at all. The only thing I had going through my head was, if my baby needs to get out of me, get him out of me. I want him to arrive safely and healthily. And after all that we had already gone through, of course, the thought goes through my head, I am not losing this baby after everything we've gone through to get him. And he's our miracle. And, we loved him already. And the idea that there was anything possibly threatening that was terrifying. I definitely had the mentality, I wasn't thinking about myself at all. It never was going through my head how the situation was affecting me or my body. I was just thinking about Colton. And the laborist came in, and he was able to get the heart rate monitor attached to his scalp while I was on all fours. And we were able to pick up his heartbeat pretty quick then. And he was down at about 70 beats per minute, where through most of labor, he was around 140. So we watched his heart rate begin to steadily climb. Mine began to steadily climb. It seemed like, we were headed in the right direction, and the laborist seemed very positive about it. So hung out like that for a couple more minutes as his heart rate got back up to where it normally was. And at that point, they let me lay back down and lay on my left side. I think all that wrapped up by about 11:25. So only about 5 or 10 minutes, but the longest, most terrifying 5 or 10 minutes of my life. A very traumatic situation, more traumatic than I processed at the time. It wasn't until afterwards, and I would look back at my labor, that I would feel the emotions as to, I think, how much fear I had in that time and how scary it was for, the nurses running into the room and being told I might go for emergency C-section, and just being scared for him and how he was doing and us having no idea. So I was able to lay back down at that point and progress through the rest of my labor for another 10 hours, just about 10 hours. For the rest of my labor, I could only, again, lay on my left side, which then affected my epidural. So I felt most of my labor on my right side, kind of lower back wrapping around into my groin. I could feel almost every contraction. So half relaxed and pain-free. I got 2 updoses from the anesthesiologist, and then was able to updose myself every now and then. So I did. So I labored like that back and forth with taking care of, trying to up my epidural pain medicine and then trying to rest. But after all of the stuff went down with his heart rate, I never could really rest and fall asleep. I was always listening for his heart rate, listening to the nurses station right outside my room. They were all kind of, watching very closely on his monitor and my monitor in case anything weird started to happen. But bless it, at about 8:30 a.m., nurse came in and checked me, and I was finally 10 centimeters. So I had labored about 20 hours at this point, just shy of 20 hours. And they said, we're gonna give you a half an hour to rest, and around 9, we're gonna get ready to start pushing. So I chilled for about a half an hour. My nurses came in and said, let's do some practice pushes. So on the next contraction, I pushed for 10 seconds, took a breath, pushed for 10 seconds. By the end of that second push, she was yelling at me, don't push, stop pushing, just the tiniest little push for this next one, because she and my husband could at this point already see a good chunk of this kid's hair. So he was ready to come out. So we called my doctor and put me back into a laying position on my left side because his heart rate dipped again, had the on-call laborist ready again just in case, telling me we may not be able to wait for your doctor, we may just need to get him out if this continues. But waited about 10-15 minutes for my doctor to show up. And then, as you will see in this next clip, when she got there, it was go time. And 3 pushes of 1 contraction, and we welcomed Colton into the world. And it was the best, absolute best moment of my life. So, share that moment with you now. Welcome into one of the most intimate, amazing, beautiful moments of my entire life. In this next clip of him being born, and then followed by the second best moment of when I finally got to hold him, and he was just with me and my husband, and everything that we had prayed for so long for throughout our infertility, even before knowing that we were going through infertility and trying to start a family, throughout my pregnancy, all of the nerves and the fears, just the abundant relief that he was in my arms and he was there and he was healthy and everything was intact. There is no feeling like that, and it's hard to express what that meant exactly, but the emotion that you can see in the video clips explains it all, and I still can't watch them to this day without getting emotional myself. But thank you for listening to his birth story, and enjoy these clips when Colton John Lowell came into the world.
What was that? 2. Yeah, let's be back on 2. I think we're about to start one. Do you feel the pressure?
Not quite.
Here we go. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Breath. Push. 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 Grab those legs. Keep going. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Go down. Breath. And push again. Push. 2, 3. Keep going. 5, 7 now. 8, 9, 10. One more push. Push. Keep going. Yep. Step out. 8, 9, 10.
Oh.
Down.
He's out?
It's like an awesome picture. We did like 3 pushes.
Boom.
Ready? Yes.
Oh. Oh.
Behind you. What are you doing? He's a present off. Careful. There we go. There's a nickel. I didn't know. Cut right in between the 2. Right in between. Right up your steel. You're gonna get them all cleaned up and get right back to you, okay? Oh, you are cheesy. Good size. I don't need a real bike on this 16 pounds. That was lovely pushing.
After all that.
I know, right? That was awesome.
little bit of rain.